Hello, guys. I'm back with you on Syriana Analysis with a special guest. I don't want to call her a guest because I don't want this to be like an interview setting. I want to chat with Naomi. She is an American citizen and she was an American veteran during the first Gulf War. And she's a blogger now and she's active on social media, actually on Twitter. And the other day, I came across one of her tweets that she wrote, like a thread, I would say, on Twitter, and it went really viral. And as you can see now, I'm showing you on this screen, she wrote about her transition from being a pro to anti-Ukraine that happened gradually over the last year. And I never took the time to apologize for arguing against people who tried to warn me about Ukrainian Nazis. You all were right, I was wrong, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm grateful that we managed to still stay friends, and that's really good because nowadays if we disagree in politics, it's like finished, right? Nobody wants to talk with you. And maybe it's because no matter whose side of the story we believed, we, Tulsi supporters, so you're a Tulsi supporter, had the same goal, a peaceful resolution, no matter whose fault the Ukrainian mess is. I used to say that it was not helpful to talk about Ukrainian Nazis because there were ethno-nationalists on both sides of the civil war, but that was before I realized that Ukraine Nazism is state-sponsored, and they have been running an ethnic cleansing campaign since 2010. Now, I spoke to you before this interview, and you said like some doubts started to you started to doubt lots of things that been said on social media, I would say, especially after Syria. And that's interesting because I also as you may know, I come from Syria, and lots of people digest what the media tells them, and I don't blame them, right? But it's impressive to see like a person like you who spends time in researching and checking, double checking, I would say, the information they are getting. So you are genuinely interested in a peaceful resolution, as you mentioned, and that's why I'm happy to have you on Syriana Analysis.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Syria is when I started to doubt the narrative. You know, being a veteran, I consider myself a patriot, and I don't like to think of my country as lying to me. You know, especially the intelligence agency. When I was in the military, I did work somewhat in the intelligence agency. I was a PRP monitor. And it's just an institute that I trusted. But when I found out, and you know, it was supporting Tulsi Gabbard that actually led me to this realization. When I found out that our CIA was funding Al Qaeda and ISIS and you know the terrorist elements,
yes,
and our military was supporting the SDF, and those two groups were fighting against each other in Syria, man, it was just like heartbreaking. You know, it's like there's a war going on in Syria between our U.S. military and the CIA, and I felt like this is a constitutional crisis, and why is nobody talking about this? It's crazy to me, absolutely crazy to me. But yeah, that's when I started to realize that we actually have like two different sets of government, and they work against each other. And I don't trust everything they tell us anymore.
Yeah, actually, what you mentioned is true, and I have read. I don't remember now which website was it, but it's an American one, whether the New York Times or the Washington Post, one of these newspapers. Like the title was like, "A Pentagon-backed rebel groups are fighting a CIA-backed rebel groups in Syria." It's like two different groups supported by different agencies in the United States or institutions. They're fighting each other in Syria. It's like as if the proxy war itself is not enough between, I would say, the government forces against these so-called rebels who are mostly like Islamists, right? And from the point of view of the United States or the morals, the values that we speak about, and we're talking about the administrations, right, not the people. These Islamists, according to them, are an arch enemy of the United States. And then you see underground, unfortunately, that these groups are being funded, supported, vetted, embedded with, sorry to say, CIA and other Pentagon forces.
Yeah, they are literally aiding and abetting an official enemy of the United States, which makes them literally traitors.
Mm-hmm.
They're literally committing treason by doing this, and I don't understand why it's still going on. I really don't, And Tulsi went before Congress and put this bill up, Stop Arming Terrorism, and nobody batted an eyelash about it. It didn't pass, and nobody paid attention to it. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. But I think that's when I started to think that I need to be more intellectually curious. So when I hear about something going on, I do investigate it, and I don't just trust the United States media. So Twitter is actually helpful for that, because I could follow the SDF on Twitter and see what they're doing. And you know what? I mean, I see that they work with Russia all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and the Syrian government all the time. So it just, anyways, it's just kind of mind blowing. It's heartbreaking to the anniversary of the Syrian Civil War. And there was I listened in on a Zoom panel of the SDF leader and the guy who runs the NGO with the white helmets, and the woman who organized the protests that triggered the Civil War. They all had this meeting on the 10th anniversary, and it was interesting to me because the Syrian nationals were talking about how the Civil War is over and everybody needs to get the fuck out of the country so that we can rebuild our country and all of this stuff. But then the American ones who were working in Syria, they were all like, no, we need to arm the rebels, and they just didn't want it to end. I just think it's sad. It's really, really sad. I don't think this is a direction you wanted to take us in here, but Syria just kind of breaks my heart.
Yeah,
Breaks my heart, really.
If you put politics aside, on a humanitarian level, that you have a group of, I would say, people in position of power that are literally strangling other people they're like humans, like me and you, and they are banning them from recovery, reconstruction, food, medicine, etc. It's mind blowing, right? It is like, do these people even have a heart? Like sometimes you really ask, because I mean, if you're a politician, you want to serve the interests of your people, right? And when you see what these people are doing to Syria, it's like they're not serving the interests of the American people, because they're only generating hatred by the people who are suffering in Syria against the United States, although the ordinary people have nothing to do with this, right? But what's the benefit? I mean, what's the strategic benefit of the United States from strangling the Syrian people? What's the geostrategic or geopolitical? There is nothing. It's just that they want to keep this stalemate the way it is, so that they don't allow the government that came out victorious out of this war against the regime change war to help the people reconstruct and heal. So they're like telling Assad, okay, you won this war, but if you want to rule this country, let it be a jungle and you will be the ruler of the jungle instead of being a ruler of a country, right?
There's this idea that our government, our State Department, their political goal in Syria is to overthrow Assad, but I don't believe that. And I don't believe that for a second. If they really wanted to get rid of Assad, they would have already. I mean, in the way they did Saddam, what I think they want is to keep the country destabilized. Chaos. Just keep the region destabilized so that it does not rebuild itself and become an influential part of that region. By keeping it destabilized is just keeping Syria from having a voice in what goes on in that part of the world. So no, I think they're lying to us. I don't think they want to overthrow them. I think that's crap. What do you think?
I think at the beginning the intention was to practice maximum pressure on the government to change its policy. So if Assad changes his policy, why would they overthrow him, right? At the end, they want this country to be on a certain track that goes alongside the American aspiration. But then when Assad refused let's say, the dictates of the United States, and this is started after the Iraq War, they started to sanction him or the government and the people, and they started to fund the opposition, etc., and then the Islamists. So the tendencies have changed. It depends on the time frame that we're speaking. There was some time between 2012 and 2014. They wanted to overthrow him when ISIS grew a lot, and they saw that ISIS is an opportunity that ISIS itself can kill Assad, right? They don't need to come in Syria and kill him. But then they didn't expect that Assad would call his allies in Iran and in Russia. And this is clear from John Kerry's leaked audio. He was talking to some Syrian opposition figures, of course, between quotations, in the United States, those lobbyists, and he said, and somebody is recording it, and WikiLeaks later leaked that audio, that yeah, we were watching the advance of ISIS, and we thought it's a good idea because they wanted to practice pressure on Assad, so he compromises. But instead of him forcing him to compromise, he invited Putin to come to Syria. So they didn't expect that Putin would intervene, I would say, in Syria. It depends on the time frame. But now, as you mentioned, 100% true. They don't want to remove Assad. They just want to keep him in Syria, in a destabilized Syria that has no influence in the region. It's irrelevant, I would say, right? If your economy is destroyed, your society is fragmented, your army is, big part of it is exhausted of 11 years of war, or which army can fight 11? The people who went to the army in 2010, and they're still in the army till now, and just imagine the psychological impact on them during these years in service and against one of the strongest, I would say, terrorist groups in the world. ISIS was horrifying, and I know from my friends, some of them were in the army. It's like when they hear ISIS, like is a few kilometers away, and they're like Allahu Akbar, like they're yelling. It's terrifying because everything you remember is these pictures that these guys are coming, and if they capture you, they will make a YouTube video out of you, right? And they have like as if they watched this movie from the Hollywood Saw, like they like how they want to kill this person, right? It's like they don't just want to shoot him; they like they want to have fun in killing him, right? So it was horrible. But in Ukraine. The issue, like in Syria, we would always talk about the Islamists, right? And in Ukraine, I mean, we talk about the neo-Nazis. But don't you think, or do you think it's a little bit exaggerated that this influence of the neo-Nazis in Ukraine, or in your observation, like you saw, no, that these neo-Nazis have actual power and it's state sponsored, for example?
They have a lot of power. A lot of power. They are. Well, people think of what's going on in Ukraine in a very wrong way. I think of in 2014, they actually overthrew the government, and people don't like to think of that. You know, they tell us that it's a peaceful protest, but if you look back at all the videos, you can see it wasn't a peaceful protest. They took over cities. Government buildings throughout West Ukraine before they even marched on Kiev. And they literally overthrew the government. They threatened to use all of the weapons that they had seized from the police stations throughout West Ukraine to have an armed rebellion if the president didn't step down. They gave him like by 10 o'clock tomorrow, you need to step down, or we're gonna have an armed siege, and they had already taken over like a lot of the buildings already by that time. But they actually overthrew the government there, and there was a few months in between then and when they elected a new president, and in that period of time, they installed mechanisms of power that they're pretty much running the government like a shadow junta. Okay, so they got rid of all of the local police and replaced them with the national police with all of their guys. Their regular military was pretty much depleted. A lot of those guys actually defected and went over to the DPR and the LPR and Crimea. It was weekend, and they created a whole new branch of military. It was like, they put Azov and integrated them in the military. No, that they didn't. They created a brand new branch that is controlled by the Minister of Interior, not the Department of Defense. And that guy is part of the right sector. And they answer to nobody. The president has no control over them. And they have these patrols, which are also their right sector guys. So they are the cops, they are the patrol officers, they are the military, and they bully their legislators to vote the way that they want them to vote. And every time, whether it was Poroshenko or Zelensky, if they started to negotiate for peace in the Donbass, they would threaten to kill them and say, we're going to overthrow the government again. And those presidents are always, the people vote for them because they think that they're going to bring them peace and they're pro-Russia, but then they end up betraying them because these militants threaten their lives, probably their families, etc. They have a lot of power. It's a big lie that they don't. A huge big lie. And when I read
I'm sharing now with the audience the video of Zelensky talking to the Azov fighters. I think this is from 2019. And you mentioned that some of the presidents tried to limit the power of the neo-Nazis, right? But they're too powerful. And you can see the way they speak to Zelensky, like from a position of, I would say, of a higher hierarchy, like they're looking at him in an arrogant way. And you can see how, from his eyes, if you know anything of body language, you understand that they don't take Zelensky seriously here. And they're smiling the way he's speaking now to this Azov fighter, to Zelensky. And Zelensky even says, I'm the president of this country. Like, I'm not a fool. Treat me with respect like I'm 42 years old president.
And they tell him, go home and read the memo we sent you.
Exactly. So you think like at least like should we give some credit at least to Zelensky that he tried, like when you see this video, for example, from 2019, he tried to talk to the Azov to at least contain their power and convince them of peace process with Russia, right? But they said no capitulation. So did Zelensky change his mind later, or how did that happen?
I really don't know. Like, I've gone back and forth between wondering whether the person that he ran as when he was a president, he gave everybody the impression that he, was going to be good to the Russian and the Greek and the Roma communities and be fair to them. And he even, he had a TV show that ran in Russian language instead of Ukrainian. And, he said that he was going to bring peace and he would bow down to Putin if that's what it takes. And he didn't care if it cost him any political capital. And so, when he was elected, I really thought that he was going to go ahead and implement the Minsk agreements. I thought he was a genuine thing, but I don't know. I don't know. I go back and forth, especially when you think about who financed his campaign. The guy who financed his campaign, Kolomoisky, I think that's how you say his name. He also finances some of the biggest Nazi battalions, and he calls himself a Juden Bandreit, or Banderjuden. He calls himself a Banderjuden. So he's a believer in vandalism. So I really don't know. Sometimes I think he is the real thing, and that he was pressured, and maybe they have his children held hostage somewhere because the SBU are known to do that. They're known to kidnap people's children. There's a video of a mayor from one of the towns where he's pleading to the president to have the SBU free his daughter, who they had kidnapped, in order to keep him in line during the war. So,
Wow.
they're shady. And Aristovich, who is now his one of his key advisors, he was involved with the Nazi battalions from the beginning. He was one of the organizers of the Euromaidan protests, and there was an incident that triggered a lot of the violence in his group, the St. Mary's Battalion. They were the primary instigators for that. And this is before the shooting. This is the one, where they say, well, if the police hadn't cracked down on the people, then things wouldn't have gotten violent. But they provoked something. I forget which building it was, but they provoked that. And he takes a lot of credit for the Euromaidan, and he's in charge of the psychological program of the volunteer battalions, so that's Nazi battalions, and he's a sicko. In like the first weeks of the Civil War, he did a message, and it's probably still up on his YouTube page because he's that arrogant and has that much hubris that he thinks that he can do this crap with impunity. But it's probably still up there, where he tells the man, he's talking about how people are talking about the war that's going on. Don't be afraid. You should look at it as an opportunity to abandon your civilized conventions and unleash your, animal desires or whatever, and look at it as an opportunity as that. And another time he was trying to talk to a podcaster who was concerned about the far right and all of the things that they were doing. And he said, oh, don't worry about them. They're not here to oppress you or me or the people who understand what's going on. They're here to oppress the people in the East who don't understand what's going on. And they're to suppress them that don't understand the people. And he named them, the people in Mariupol, in Odessa, in the Donbass, in Kherson. And he also said that there were a few mechanisms that they could use to keep the politicians and society in line for the revolution. And one of them would be to implement laws about treason, which, all of that is happening right now. And the other thing that he said is to use blackmail and bribery and to appeal to financial fetishes of people in order to get them to do what they want. And he is now advising the president of Ukraine. So they might have something on him, some kind of blackmail or...
Blackmail, yeah.
Yeah.
It's possible because in politics it happens, such things. Let's remember the case of Jeffrey Epstein. What was the entire purpose of that island is to blackmail politicians and to change their opinions,
awful.
to record them, right? And till this moment, we don't know the guest lists of Jeffrey Epstein or Maxwell. And I think we will not know it anytime soon. And it will be buried. All these people who were victims, they will just be traumatized because these people are so powerful. And imagine that the other day somebody was asking me why the journalists aren't investigating. I was like, because one, they either work for a corporate media, so they're not interested in investigating, or they don't have a wish to be killed anytime soon. That's why nobody wants to investigate this case, right? Anyone who touches this case, they either commit a suicide, between quotation, or they die in their apartment. So why would anyone touch this case, right? So that's possible that they're blackmailing Zelensky. I mean, I watched this guy's interview. Sometimes I feel like he probably had a genuine interest at the beginning when he came to power to make peace deal, right? But when you become a part of a system, you become part of a hierarchy, and there are powers inside this hierarchy that can influence you, and you don't want to leave that. When you are in a position of power, you also want to stay there, right? This is also a human thing. And also this outside pressure on him by the United States and other NATO allies to divert his politics maybe against Russia, because he was the one who sent tens of thousands of soldiers on the borders with the Donbass, and then it was Russia that attacked on the Ukrainian forces. So people do not really know that there was a war since 2014 after the coup d'etat that you already mentioned, and over 13,000 people died in Donetsk by the Ukrainian army and these neo-Nazi battalions. And there is a constant shelling on these areas. And of course, we haven't seen any of these flags in the bios trying to show virtue signaling and trying to show sympathy with the civilians. And I wholeheartedly feel sad for the Ukrainian people, because in my opinion, they are a victim of a big proxy war between two big powers, that they've been used as a cannon fodder, right, in this conflict. And we have been also passed through such an experience. So when I meet with the Ukrainian, and especially if they are against Russia, I would say I really try to tell them, you're not going to win this war. Believe me, this is a war that is meant to continue and continue. It's one of the biggest also money laundering operations after Afghanistan that Julian Assange warned about in 2010, and he said about Afghanistan. And nowadays we witness a similar thing. Yes, it's not meant to be won. This case, it's meant to be continued.
Yeah, it's just like a live gun show, you know. I mean, there were a couple of times when their Defense Department tweeted out, you know, send your weapons here if you want them tested, and it's immoral, absolutely immoral. But I wanted to say before I got distracted on my little rant, because the rest of it just kind of makes me, anyways. That I think people look at this all wrong. You know, you were talking about how in Syria, our government supports the radicals. They're supporting the radicals in Ukraine as well. They support insurgencies. And the Euromaidan is an insurgency, and the so-called rebels, they're actually the ones who are defending their democracy. You know, their country was overthrown. They're defending their democracy. They're the real democracy fighters, not these guys who just illegally overthrew their government by force. It used to really bother me. Why does our government support radical, uncivilized terrorists everywhere? But if you think about it, who are you going to get to overthrow your government but these types of people?
Yes. Ideologically speaking, these are the people who would not hesitate to fight till the end.
And betray their own country.
Yes, so just let's draw parallels between Syria and Ukraine. When you send weapons, heavy weapons to Syria, and you say it's going to the moderate rebels, so of course there are no moderate rebels in Syria, and even if they existed, they are so weak and they are outnumbered and outpowered by bigger forces such as ISIS and Nusra.
Even Joe Biden said that there were no moderate rebels in Syria. You know,
yes, he said it. I think this was in Turkey.
Yeah, he was talking about Turkey, and he got Obama made him apologize to Turkey for it. It's so ridiculous. But no, there are no moderate rebels. When people used to say that, I would say, which group is that? Who are the moderate rebels? What is their name?
They can't name it.
No. And sometimes they say, "Oh, the SDF," but the SDF is not fighting Assad.
Yes.
The SDF is not fighting Assad. They're not the rebels there. They're fighting against the rebels.
Exactly, they are fighting against the rebels.
Yeah, because the rebels are also there to fight for Erdogan, who has this expansionist. He's occupying Syria. He's expanding his borders there, and he wants Rojava for himself. And yeah, I do not trust him. When the coup happened in Turkey, one of their diplomats came to our university to speak to our military police academy to talk to them about terrorism, and that's when I figured out, that what was going on there was really, really wrong. What Turkey was doing, because they put up this map, and he was talking about these what did he call it? These safe zones for refugees or whatever. And I was looking at the map. I'm like, actually, that looks like Turkey's trying to expand their borders. It doesn't look like a safe zone to me. That's an expansionist move that he's doing there. Nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about what Turkey is doing over there.
No. And they pretend that they are against these operations of Turkey in the northern Syria against the Kurdish forces. But who is Turkey? Turkey is a NATO member at the end of the day. And when I would say ISIS was stealing the oil of Syria, and with tens of tankers per day, they are sending it to Turkey. I mean, of course, NATO was able to detect these tankers, right? When they were moving from Syria to the border with Turkey, and then Turkey is recycling them and selling them to the black market. So where did ISIS get all this money from? By selling this Syrian oil. And who was buying the Syrian oil? It's Turkey, and Turkey is a NATO member, and there is a big military base in southern Turkey by NATO. So they were, of course, observing it and not doing anything about it, because at the end of the day, and this is a question I would like also to ask you, because when you see these powers are on the side of the Islamists in Syria and on the side of the neo-Nazis in Ukraine, so it makes me wonder, are they doing this out of only hatred against this, for example, let's say Assad and Putin, or it's a solid political project?
I think there's a whole lot of different interests that converge. There's money, there's greed, there's this ideology about yeah, I can hear you. I think there's a lot of interests that are converging, and it's not just about that, but there's money, there's power, there's an ideological idea that the United States has to remain the preeminent power in the world.
Well, I think what you said is very true. It's a combination of problems that is pushing people to be on a side that is, I would say, uncivilized and call themselves the civilized. I would like to apologize from you, because it seems there is also a technical problem from recording the video. And we have recorded already over 35 minutes with you. It was a wonderful chat. I wanted to share this with the audience of Syriana Analysis, because it is very important to share an experience, a human experience of a person who was on a political side and then changed it and accepted that it was he or she was wrong. And I was wrong on so many things, also in Syria and in Ukraine. So when you're wrong, you correct it. And this culture of accepting that you're wrong, we have to normalize it. That's why I was very happy to host Naomi. Unfortunately, she left because of a technical problem, but we had a really nice chat with her over 35 minutes. I will put the link of Naomi in the description below, guys. Go and follow her. She is also tweeting a lot from the United States, and I think she has a strong knowledge and also experience in this regard. And she was an American veteran in the first Gulf War, and it is important to build bridges with such people around the world for the sake of opening the eyes of other people. And because at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to have, I would say, to create a balance in the international system. and fairness and even distribution of the resources of the world without looting the resources of the people in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, by certain powers who still live in the era of the colonialism and think they can pursue their aspirations on the expense of other people. The other day, I was watching one of the interviews of Jordan Peterson, and he was talking about hierarchies. And he says, one of the problems with the West that they always say that hierarchies are based on power. And my problem with that was that, yes, it's not always based on power, but sometimes it's also, if we check the hierarchies on an international level, why some countries are of higher hierarchy than others, it's because some of the countries are also looting other countries, and they are putting themselves and their people of a higher position in terms of the hierarchy, right? So we need to have a balanced international system that is based on rules, international law, and also even distribution of the resources among the humans of the world. So this was for today, guys. If you like this video, please share it with your friends on social media and subscribe and hit the like button, all these stuff that YouTubers tell you all the time. But, you know, it really helps me also to spread the word and spread my work and expand and have a better reach and also better YouTube channel, right, in the algorithm of YouTube. And if you want to support my work, all the links are in the description below. You can become a patron, you can become a premium member, or you can click on the super like under this video. And it's a really big help for me, guys, because I have so much equipment and I'm doing this for the sake of also spreading information for educational purposes. Yeah. Soon we will have another video. See you next time.